Out.
Guys, thanks so much for taking the time out and joining us. Pierre and Pierre-Olivier and Piers, Brighton and Spurs, obviously really exciting times for both of the clubs at the moment. One top of the league, one in European competition for the first time ever. So exciting times for the fans as well, and looking forward to asking you a little bit more about what you're doing to capitalise on that and also how you're enhancing the experience for them. But first, Yuri, I want to come over to WSC Sports to set the scene a little bit. For those who maybe aren't so familiar, could you tell us a little bit about what it is that WSC do and how you're operating in the space?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you, and happy to be with you guys on stage. WSC Sports, we've been around for quite a while now, 12 or 13 years. And our core business is a really powerful AI technology that utilizes basically and helps media rights owners in the sports arena to maximize the value of the media rights. We've been working with almost 400 of the top media rights holders around across 24, 25 different types of sports around the world. The key element, basically, we can look at it in sort of three pillars. So the first pillar would probably be just streamlining the entire production flow. Anything which is related to content creation and utilization, helping the editors or giving the editors what we like to call superpowers. So basically removing any sort of barriers that they have for guys like Pierre to think less about how much resources he has to do things or have to pick and choose what he can and cannot afford to do in terms of times and resources, and sort of enable everything and remove all the limits. The second pillar would be probably opening new opportunities that come as a part of it. So opportunities to generate more revenue, to create more fan engagement, or unique fan engagement, to personalize the way that you reach out to fans. This is a very important element. I would say that the third one is the innovation piece, and keep on finding and developing. And again, tech and technology is the core of our business. Keep on developing new experiences for the fans. It's keeping them engaged, whether it's new formats or new channels to reach out to them. I would say in very short and an elevator pitch way.
Oh, lovely summary there. One of the things that we hear a lot in this industry, and I've certainly heard a few times this week in conversation with people around the event, is sports teams will often be sitting on just hours and hours of archived content that never gets used, and that is just a non-monetized asset, essentially. I want to ask you a little bit about what you're doing to help teams with that, and then I want to bring it over to you, Pierre-Olivier, from your perspective, because of course Spurs work with WSC, and talk about how you see that on both sides of the issue. So starting with you, Yuri, how are you helping teams, pick stuff off what would be the cutting room floor and turn it into a monetized asset?
So I think teams and clubs have some of the most important and valuable assets in general. Fans being the first and foremost, and rich history being the other one. There are a lot of others, but in this context, the context of archive. So you have fans which are keen to hear and see and experience stories of the team. They don't care, and I know it personally as a hardcore sports fan myself. I'm happy to watch replays, get into nostalgia, think about if I see an incredible goal, think about, oh, this resembles of something I saw a few years ago. But these assets are really, and we're talking about archive in that context, is really sometimes hard to unlock. You have 20 or 30 or 40 years of footage of some incredible content, but it's really hard because, again, going back to the resource element, how are you going to get? Are you going to send an editor now or someone to go and start picking up the best assists by, I don't know, Darren Anderton from the 1990s, and so on and so forth? And it's always being deprioritized. So every once in a while, someone remembers a case and he pulls out a piece of video. And one of the things that we do, we basically automate the entire process. So we can ingest all of this content. We analyze it in the same way that we analyze content in real time. And then if you want to create a video of, I don't know, all Spurs goals of the past 20 years, you should be able to do it in probably 20 seconds. And this sort of elevate. And then, as I mentioned earlier, all the opportunities of engaging with the fans, building more stories, and we're going to talk maybe a little bit later about the endless amount of stories. But you basically open up so much more real estate and so much more power to do other things and engage fans and generate more revenue.
Well, that's certainly a great description of how it works in practice. Pierre-Olivier, would you agree that that's how things have been playing out with your team?
Yeah, I think archives are super important because they represent the history of a club, and history is key. For Spurs, this is about 140 years of history, so we don't have video footage for of all these years. That was not possible at the time, but it's true that our fans, I would say older fans or new fans, they need to understand the history of the club, where we're coming from, who we are, what the legacy and so on. This is why we are doing something. And then archives plays a big part, and you're trying to tell a story, building on what's happening now, but sometimes also on archives. And it's true that the how you access to this archive is complicated, or it's still complicated, but it's true that with a solution like WSC, this is simpler and simpler. But I'll just give you an example. We were discussing 15 minutes ago, and I was telling you I need to send an email. Just give me a minute. We are playing Fulham on Monday, and at the stadium, at the Tottenham Hotspur stadium, we have big screens. So we're trying to make the most of these screens, and we display a number of videos. And there is a video that is about our history, but we are also trying to create bespoke videos about our opponent. So we're trying to build a video about Fulham. And then the editor is trying to get footage from the most important matches. So how is he doing it? First, or until now, he was talking to the editorial team, and by this I mean the guys who have the most experience. And we can say, wow, I remember there was one great match in '65 or another one in '84. You need to add this, to add this. So then, where are they stored exactly? How can I download the content and so on? So that was complicated, and you needed days to do this. But with the solutions, you can step by step. I insist on the step by step. Ingest all the content, tag it step by step, and yes, then you can say, okay, I want a video of the best Fulham moments over the last 30 years or something like this, and you have a kind of pre-selection, and then you have an idea, you have a producer who can add some flavor, but you just saved a lot of time, and then you can do a better video, and you can do more, and you can do more. So yeah, that's super important.
You mentioned a word there that I definitely want to come back to, because it's maybe going to be the word of this session, bespoke. But before we get back to that, Piers, over to you. As mentioned, really exciting time at the moment for Brighton. Lots has changed over the last 5 years. You know, the club is in a completely different place to where it was 5 and certainly 10 years ago. Could you walk us through what that growth story has looked like from the club side and thinking about the fans?
Yeah, of course. Firstly, pleasure to be here. From Brighton Hove Albion perspective, obviously, it's a fantastic time to be part of the club at the moment, and the trajectory that the club's been on in the last few years in particular is sort of all testament to the plans that were put in place long before that, so spanning back. If you were to think back and imagine where we are now with the 6th place finish in European football this season for the first time ever, and it's probably a common theme, there's a lot of firsts for us at the club at the moment in terms of Europe and other things that have come our way. It's testament to sort of the plans that were put in place. If you can imagine the club of where it is today, that 25 years ago didn't have a home, was on the brink of going out of the football pyramid and out of business itself, to then come back under the fantastic ownership and the leadership of Tony Bloom, Paul Barber putting things in place in order to bring us to a place where we've managed to break into the Premier League, sustain that, and then obviously look to kick on into Europe. And I can't take any credit for that because it's obviously on the football side, but what it does for us from a business administration side and from a digital side, from a growth and engagement opportunity, is really accelerate that process and give you more leverage in the sense of, one, acquisition of new fans. So we have a real core audience that comes to the Amex every week. That replicates around 2 to 3% of our global audience now. So of that 98, 97% of audience from international markets, what is it that we can do in terms of acquisition of those fans? And then to Pierre's point, education of those fans is crucial, and the bespoke nature of that we're seeing great returns from, and I think is a blueprint across what a lot of other clubs are doing right now. And I think, in the example, it's good to hear that you in WSC are able to cut through a lot of the noise with the wealth of content that clubs have and that we accumulate in the leagues, and the clubs that operate within it have almost an overwhelm of content and that back archive. But what it's good to do with that, in a sense of just tagging into your points, is making that content work for you, and especially around that education piece and that bespoke piece in terms of saying who we are, where we've come from, and telling that story. Brighton at the moment, with these new fans that we're engaging with and these international audiences, are in a really unique opportunity, and really early on with telling that journey, telling that story about Brighton, conveying our values and our brand and what we stand for. And we've seen great returns, obviously, over the last couple of years in particular. And as new superstars sort of emerge into the team, it allows you to authentically grow through different markets and set up other digital pathways and opportunities.
Generally speaking, I'm quite interested to know, actually, and I know we didn't discuss this beforehand, so please forgive me, but fans of both clubs probably quite happy at the moment. Does that make your job easier or harder?
I think it could lull you into a full sense of security with that. I think we're in a moment in time, and what I just explained in terms of prior to this, we weren't in this space. So I think for us now, as sort of custodians of the club, if you like, working at the club in such a great time, is to future-proof it for the next generation. And that goes for internally as a club, so setting up the foundations and the principles and the infrastructure so that we can sustain this, organic and almost quality growth, if you like. So that there are still bums on seats in 20 years if performances aren't going our way in the stadium, and that we nurture the international audiences that are fairly new on in their journey and at different touch points in the digital ecosystem right now, that we can nurture them along certain different funnels. Bespoke funnels goes back to that point of sort of a tailored message on tailored platforms at tailored times to ensure that we are in a better place in a few years' time. If the results aren't going well, we have the fundamentals in place, processes in place, that obviously it's a bonus if the results are going well. We have a lot of happy fans at the moment, as I'm sure Spurs do, but we know that in football that's not always the case.
To change in a moment, Carter. Pierre-Olivier, what about yourself? Does that make your life, generally speaking, easier or harder?
Easier, definitely. Definitely, and no, I prefer the more position now than 6 months ago, definitely. It can evolve. I think it will evolve, but yeah, I think this is easier. This is easier for a couple of reasons. One is first, when football is good, I think this is simpler for the different content teams when it deals with access with the players, with the staff, and so on. And we know that this is something that is super important because compared to the traditional broadcasters, the different clubs they have a direct access to the players, and I think now on top of highlights and press conferences, I would say the traditional part, the fans want to know more about the players. It could be about long form, but also super short form with them, just what are they doing now. And if you are in a good position, this is simpler because the players feel more comfortable, and you can have a better access to them. So when you lose, it's more difficult, and also the fan sentiment can be a little bit more complicated to handle. I don't know. You publish you lose on a Sunday, and there is training on Monday, and you publish a picture, for example, of just a player training but smiling, and you would have people saying, "Why are you smiling? You lost yesterday. You should be suffering like me." So. You see what I mean? I think it's not like that black and white, but yes, this is definitely easier, I would say, but also more pressure because more eyeballs and more people say, "Ooh, who are these guys at Brighton? Why are they good? Or Spurs? Why are they good now? They should be. They should have disappeared. Harry is not there anymore. How come are they good? It's not possible." You need to tell a story. You need to explain what you did and why it's working. So,
I want to quickly relate to what Piers just said. So I think part of the issues with football clubs in general, and part of the challenges and you feel it much more than I do, is the volatility. It's a very volatile business, and it's very much impacted, volatile. The transfer market is volatile, so you got lucky when you got a player, or you got unlucky and you got a player and spend millions of pounds for nothing. It's very volatile. Part of the shift that I'm seeing a lot of clubs are moving away from this volatility, or trying to control it and make it a bit more stable as much as possible. So for example, if the old school perception is club lives around the games, and it's more about, all right, this is the live coverage of the game, and this is what we as a club has to say. So this would be, for example, in content-wise, game highlights of yesterday, and now let's prepare for next game. And this is across all elements, not just media. I think clubs are gradually starting to understand that the power of a club is a club, as Pierre and Piers both mentioned, as a brand. There's a full story. It's not jumping in between games. There's a full story. There's a full narrative. The history, and we talked about archive before, is a big part of it, but it's not the only thing. There's some messages or brand-related values that which are very different, or some of them are different, that you want to portray. And you want to build a story. The story is much more stable, and the fans, the hardcore fans would probably keep on following Spurs if they're bad or if they're good. And then you have the casual fans that will probably follow more when you're good. But if there's a story, and there are constant stories, endless stories all the time, they'll keep on following. And there's a way to build around it. And I think that's, again, reducing the volatility a little bit and creating a narrative is much more sustainable. And I think a lot of the clubs, and at least based on my perception, are going that way.
I kind of want to develop on that. You mentioned sort of building a story there. When we talk about fan engagement, one of the very obvious touch points there, the most obvious touch point, is match day. But obviously it's not match day every day. So how are you working to ensure that fans are still being engaged when it's not a match day, they're still being built into that narrative, they're still being sort of funneled into the network when it's not necessarily time to go down to the ground or time to watch on TV?
Yeah, I think naturally, obviously, all clubs see the biggest spikes on match day. Coincidentally, I think when we do lose and have a bad defeat, the biggest engagement comes from the opposition teams or some of the other teams' fans in the Premier League that like to see us lose sometimes. So we take that as a compliment. I think it's a unique position to be in. To your point, I think fundamentally, obviously, you see huge spikes around the match day. I think a lot of teams, really nail their match day cycle and their content plans around that, but obviously, it's about creating a longer form piece. And again, it goes back to sort of nurturing those audiences. And again, for us, it comes back to who are our fans, asking the right questions of our fans with the data collection tools and techniques that we've got in use, so that we can understand sort of their behavioural tendencies throughout a week and throughout a game week, which now includes 2 games for us. So the spikes are more minimal, which is a bonus in that sense. But ultimately, we want to move away from those peaks and troughs of on a match day on a Saturday at 3 p.m. where you see the spikes. Throughout the week, how can you then talk to your audience on a more consistent basis to nurture them? Again, comes back to the storytelling of the club. Different fans will be at different stages of the storytelling and will need different messaging on different formats. Again, with more of an international presence coming into the mix, different platforms, different formats open themselves up for effective use of this and able to speak to people at different times with different messaging. And for us, it's really about sort of nailing down a clear content strategy. So how do we bring our values as a club through to different fan bases at different times? And that's consistent throughout the week, whether that's a weekly release of a podcast on a Tuesday, a live show always on a Thursday from the training ground, manager's notes on a Wednesday that people are then tuning in for. And then you might get your super fans that are, really interested in the 3 p.m, on a Saturday, but then you might get new fans, say, from Japan with a Matoma interest that only sort of care about what he's doing behind the scenes at the training ground, who he's mates with, what's his day in the life like for Kuru Matoma, and bringing them closer. I think ultimately all fans want to be seen, heard and included within the club, and I think the more ways that clubs go out of their way in order to bring fans closer to the product, to the inside, to the inner workings of the club and making them feel part of that, I think that's a really compelling sort of North Star, if you like, throughout your week to minimise those peaks and minimise those troughs.
Would you agree with that, Pierre-Olivier? Is that similar to what's happening at Spurs?
Yeah, definitely. I think you start with the positioning of the club, who you are exactly, what is this club, what is the positioning, who do we want to be, what are our values, and I think this is something that is usually underestimated by many clubs, but then that makes a difference between the different clubs. They can all have different positioning, but you need to have something that is unique. So, for example, for us, for the club, this is usually about trying to build amazing experiences. So the stadium then is a big asset for this. And when it deals with football, this is about playing an attractive football. And when you lose this a little bit, then this is complicated, because the story that you're storytelling might be confusing, and you have difficulties to tell a story. I think that was our case. We were in this situation for maybe for 2 years, but then when you're aligning the top message and the values, the manager, the players, the people who work there, this is simpler. And then it's in short, honestly, match day are simple. It's okay. Then what do you say on a Tuesday? It becomes like it's a programming grid, and it's a mix of football, non-football. If you have an academy, and if the academy is important, then you get it might be a moment where you talk about the academy. If there is a foundation, and you're just explaining what's going on, and even if the players are not playing, they can be there, and they have a life. They're just returning from the international break, they're just arriving. Bam, how was it? 30 seconds. We did well. I scored 2 goals, or no, our travel was bad, blah, blah. Hey guys, I'm here on Monday. See you at the stadium or whatever. That's part of the story. If you are a fan, simply saying, if you are a fan, you want to know what's happening, and so you would just need to let them know. And then, as you were saying, on the best platform, because they can be on different platforms. So the storytelling can be, or the format can be a little bit different platform by platform, but you're trying to tell the same story.
I sort of want to come to a combination of what the two of you said there, because you talked about players and their stories, and you mentioned Karim Matoma, and there's definitely a couple of interesting things there, because player-led engagement it's always been a key part of why people support their favourite teams and support their favourite sports, but increasingly we're seeing a new kind of fan who maybe even supports a player more than their club or more than that sport. In developing those stories across Brighton and Spurs, there are a couple of key stand-up players, Karim Matoma obviously, Heung-min Son, and Manor Solomon, for example. What does developing those stories and sort of taking those to potentially new markets look like in practice, and how are you making the most of them? I'll start with you, Yuri, to talk about how you're helping clubs do this.
So I think it's really important. I think, first of all, each story has multiple perspectives. Let's take the most basic example. We could do one game highlights, which is very neutral. We could talk about it, which shows sort of an equal picture, like the broadcast look. And we could do a very subjective games highlight that would focus, for example, just on the best moments Tottenham had, rather than the opponent, for example. Or it could be game highlights, which is focusing on a specific player and shows all players. So each type of fan, this could be geography, so from different countries. And again, a Brighton fan in Japan is obviously going to care more about Matoma and also want to see a lot more content by Matoma. And it's very different than a fan that grew up next to the stadium, or a fan who is a casual football fan from the UK. So you can take the same story and show it from multiple perspectives. And then the second thing is that the way that people consume, and the younger they are, the more obvious that is, the way they consume stories and content in general is very different. In the past, we used to have like one long story or 2 stories. We're talking about infinite number of stories now, but they are shorter. So like Pierre mentioned, 30 seconds, how was your vacation, or what did you do, or something like that. So any type of stories, but then you need a lot of those. And the more you're able to sort of break that and personalize it and make sure that a fan in Japan gets what he wants to see, and a hardcore fan that lives within 10 miles of the stadium gets something else which is more relevant for him, and the ability to take, and I'm adding to that all the data that the clubs have, the ability to incorporate all of that into personalization in large scale, I think is a key, because every fan eventually has their own sort of perspective, and they're all different.
It's a mix of localization and personalization. Localization first, because you You can have a language element. It could be Japanese, Korean, or whatever. And then in a market, you can have different platforms, especially on social media. Some platforms can exist only in specific markets. So, and if this platform is strong, you clearly ask the question: well, should we be on this platform? Yes or no? And usually, if you have such a big player, yes, you need to launch a localized channel on a bespoke platform. And then you start to you talk about the language. Okay, you need to localize, so we need to have some host, commentary, and so on, because it has to feel local. But also with the same language, you can ask, for example, in the US, they need, I think, a bespoke approach when it deals with Premier League, because the tone is a little bit different, their approach is different. Or at the moment we are discussing Australia, should we have a bespoke approach for Australia? Well, not sure. There's the debate, but as a minimum, you know that you want to do a little bit. You want to do it a little bit differently. We know that they want to know more in Australia about our coach. So you need to do more. So this is where tech can help. Or in Korea, maybe here you have a highlight of Sony in the. I don't know, in the UK, the highlight is only 90 seconds. But in Korea, no. They want 10 minutes just of Sony, so no-brainer. So that's the kind of discussion that we have every day.
Yeah, I think echoing Pierre's points there, especially with the Asian market, we've seen similarities, obviously with Crew coming on board. I think ultimately it's about meeting the fan in their place of engagement, so whether that's a different continent, a different country, whatever it may be, there are different nuances that we would have over here, and in a different way of consuming content, if you will. I think what players like that, from different countries and figureheads of their countries tend to do is allow you as a brand, as a football club, to authentically transcend your brand and your message into those countries. The player is almost the gateway for that. I think there's a lot more you can do outside of that, because obviously you can't be reliant fully on a player obviously sticking around for a prolonged period of time whilst you build your strategy out. Is there a contingency plan that if the player does move on, you've ingrained your club, your brand values, and your sort of value proposition within that country, within those platforms, to build up a reason for that audience to remain? I think it's only going to continue the trend of your Gen Zs, your Gen Alphas, obviously supporting players that we see a hell of a lot of now. I think a good example of a couple of key points that we mentioned in terms of delivering that education to those fans is so important. Like the other player that joined us on transfer deadline day was Ansu Fati, so another sort of international superstar, face of Nike, had Messi's old shirt at Barcelona. I think he's got a £1 billion release clause in his contract, so came with a massive sort of furore and expectation and social media presence. So the key thing that we wanted to do with that audience, when we knew that all the eyeballs would be on us on that afternoon, was to make him, and we got a bit of pushback on social media from other fans, was to make him sit down, watch a video of the archive footage of where Brighton have come from to the present day, so that we're not only showing him, but through him, he's the lens that we can tell millions of other people in that period of time. So I think there's many different ways to do it, but I think the players ultimately allow you to authentically speak to new markets, and there's different sort of strategies and platforms.
And on new markets, this is where I think content marketing and analytics work together, because you need to define what does success look like, and this is not necessarily exactly the same platform by platform. So what is an impression here? What is reach engagement here? So it's important that that these teams work together to look at success, and it's evolving quickly.
Guys, we've not got much time left, so I want to end just quickly with a yes-no question. I'd love to spend the rest of the day here. I've got loads to talk to you about, but quick yes-no question for you, Piers, and for you, Pierre-Olivier. Winning a trophy this season?
Why not, yes?
I think so.
Oh, well, there we go. Let's get a round of applause for the panel, please.